My name is Kieta, Memorabilia Expert, and I'm going to be chatting a little bit about Western costume tagging, specifically in the period during the 1960s. So there was so many variations of tagging during that time. There was never anything really set by Western Costume. Of course, there was a standard where they would stitch the labels in the costume. It was never very consistent. You definitely had inconsistencies because there was always one-ups, or something was happening, or some costumer obviously needed something very quickly, and it was almost impossible to stitch a label on. Okay, so then hence therefore they would use a stamp or a machine stamp for the interior. So I just wanted to talk about that and like some of the costumes that feature the labeling during that era. So this is from 1959 into the 60s, and this was from Swamp Fox. So I just want to show you, so this is the stitched label from Western Costume, and then you would see that there would be some printed or computer generated information as well as handwritten information, which is very important. However, then here's another stamp during the same time, and I don't know if you can see that, but that is a stamp from Western Costume. So you had both during that era, and I know a lot of times it's difficult to really determine whether, or I mean, like you can't say across the board, you know, that all Western Costume labels were stitched on. Further, we're going to take you into, so this is Mary Poppins, and this is Western Costume. So this is Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar. Now this is a different type of label for Western Costume. And this was a name with a number and then her name written in the label. Again, once again, a totally different label. I can take you further now into, now this is just various Western style costumes. And we have all, and this is from different eras from the 50s and 60s. And then we have stamped on suit 3-piece, we have the size, we have a sewn on label, and then of course we have WC Company, Western Costume Company, which is a total different stamping. So, you know, once again, the labeling, just like game used jerseys, and that's another important thing to note. When you talk to a lot of the equipment managers, they'll tell you that they weren't thinking like, oh, this is 1970 and I need to go find the 1970 label that's going to match the era. No, they're not doing that. They're like getting whatever tag they have and then they're sewing it on to the jersey that they're going to be using. So there is, my point is there is inconsistencies. It's not completely perfect in terms of, you know, getting, you know, like you can't plug this into a computer program and say, oh yeah, this is just, you know, is going to equal this at all times. You know, there's many variations, and that's why provenance, when you're looking at an item, that you have to take that into consideration, you know, the authenticity of the piece, you know, and you know, the feel of it. I'm going to go into, here's a couple of more that I wanted to go over. 1958, this is Andy Griffith. This is another stamping that we have property of Western Costume. And those were in pants. This is The Hired Hand by Peter Fonda, and you had two. You had the label, and then you had the double stamping, which is then, like if you were to look at that, you're like, oh my God, that's crazy. It's like double stamp. And you would think, oh, maybe that's not authentic. That happened often. That double stamping happened often. And then again, you had, these are other stampings that would be seen on other labels that would be seen. And then, of course, you had the stamping. Here you have a red stamp over with a blue stamp and then a handwritten actor identifier, REN. You know, so these are all the variations that you would see. And then we have the Herman Munster. Here's a nice Herman Munster piece that also had the same type of labeling. So what would happen, and this was very important, and this is very well known, on the set of the Munsters, Fred Gwynne would always have many issues with his costumes because he would overheat and he'd be sweating profusely. So as a result, he would have to change out of costumes. They would have to get duplicate costumes. They would stick hoses up the back of them with AC to try to cool him down. And as a result, a lot of these costumes would rip or tear. And so they would need to either get something very quickly or have alternates on set. So they would have various stampings, and not necessarily consistent to ones that you may generally see with the written or the sewn in label for the Munsters, especially for Fred Gwynne. And then here's just a close up of the Gwynne. So these were all types of variations of the Fred Gwynne stamping. So as you see, okay, you actually have the red stamping from Western Costume on a lot, and you'll see that a lot of Fred Gwynne's costumes did have the label, but they also had the stamping, and the reason was because they needed to get quickly different suits on set. So very interesting history, and I'm really excited to chat with Western Costume a little bit about the history of their labels, what they would do. And I know they're doing a great job archiving right now, and that's a real big deal. They actually recently just had a fire, which was kind of sad. Yeah, I know, terrible. But they were able to salvage and save much of the information. But labels of Western Costume, they are all over the map. Okay, I feel that if you see that Western Costume stamping, that you're relatively safe with the authentication of wardrobe and props during the 60s, and especially with Fred Gwynne and the Munsters.